talking sports here on the Sports Buffet, just some general sports talk with our friend Anthony Romano from WDBJ 7. Got a few topics we're going to discuss with the Yankees, the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs, and might throw a few surprises in there too. So one thing we've never talked about, I don't think, with you is how did you get your start in sportscasting?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, thank you for having me back, Bob. So basically, I guess you could say it started in high school. I kind of grew up, even way back in elementary school. I was known as the guy who, during recess, everyone would play soccer, and I was never good at soccer. I've never really personally liked soccer very much, but I would be the guy running up and down the field, basically announcing the games as they were going on in the third grade soccer matches. So that's kind of where I guess my first experience kind of doing, broadcasting, announcing began, was out there on the field. And then, as I got older, I kind of realized, all right, I have a little bit of a knack for this. I took some sportscasting classes from a former MLB announcer, Vinny McCucci, who was running a sportscasting class up in Long Island where I grew up in New York. And then, I kind of, went through high school. I did some PA work for the varsity baseball team for a couple of years. I was the president of the school radio station. And then, I decided to pursue it in college. I went to the University of Missouri. I studied broadcast journalism at the J School out there, and was lucky enough to land my first job here in Roanoke. And, if people, watched and remembered my first year here, I was actually a news reporter. I worked out of our New River Valley Blacksburg bureau for a little more than a year. And then, things kind of shaped up to where, the sports reporter at the time left the station. I was already helping out a lot with Hokies football. And, that particular year I got to help cover UVA in the Final Four. And, a job opened up in the sports department, and, with the blessing of Travis Wells, who was our sports director at the time, long time here, I was able to kind of move into that role. And that's kind of where I've been ever since. And it's been really cool. It's been a blessing. And, I guess that's kind of the Spark Notes version of how I got to where I am today.
I started doing radio back when I was probably in my early 20s. Now I'm in my early 40s. But, when I listen to my early stuff, I should say, I kind of cringe. When you watch your early stuff, how do you feel?
Same way. And in fact, it's funny because, you go through some of your older stuff, or, things pop up on your Facebook timeline. It's like, oh, this happened 3 or 4 years ago on this date. I go back and watch, and same way. I cringeworthy, and not necessarily that the work itself was bad, but I feel like I've grown so far in just my track performance and the way that I say things and the tone that I use, and especially sometimes when you first start in the business, you think you're all the jazz, and then you go back and watch some of the things that you did in your first couple of years, and you're like, man, this would have been so much better now, with what I know now. And so, it in a way, it's kind of cool to see your growth, even in just a short time, only really doing this professionally for about a little more than 5 years now, but, 100%, it's totally cringeworthy. I've got some stuff from high school in the archives that I'll go back and look at sometimes. And, it's cool to see where you've come, but definitely a little cringeworthy.
I have put a few things on my podcast site of my early basketball, and I'm like, God, I hope nobody listens to this. Why did I put this on here? You talked about covering the Final Four with UVA. I believe, did you say you had started sports? You were still a reporter at that time.
So at that time, I was technically still a news reporter.
Okay.
But, it was kind of one of those things, because I was based in Blacksburg. I was doing so much every week during that year. I was covering Hokie football games with Travis, and we went up to New York City to cover Frank Beamer getting inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. And then I was also helping out with basketball a little bit, and then obviously when March Madness rolled along, it was sort of an all hands on deck type of thing. So Yeah, that was really cool. You know, me and Travis went out to California with the Hokies and the Flames, and then obviously UVA goes on and makes their incredible run, and I got to help out with that too. So, I mean, talk about a first year in the business. Right. It's hard to ask for something better than covering a national championship.
Well, I was going to say, you know, because you covered the Final Four this year with a couple of your cohorts from
Sure.
WDBJ. Did the previous, I will say, big game or big feel prep, does that make other big games feel like, you know, easier to where you're not as, I don't want to say starstruck because I think you're always going to be in awe, but you take over. You know what I'm saying, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely. I think just having some of those experiences sort of in the bank, honestly, almost more from a logistical standpoint than anything else, just knowing how things work at these events, because when you get to the points of the season where the stages get big and the lights get brighter, you know, things start to work a little differently. You don't have those, you know, more intimate access moments where, you know, you're covering a Hokies game in the regular season at Castle. You know, everyone kind of knows who you are. There's kind of the typical process that you follow. You know, it's a lot more casual, a lot more relaxed. But then you get, you know, to a Final Four setting, and everyone and their mother wants to talk to these athletes and these coaches. It gets to be a lot. So just kind of just knowing how things work and all the different rules. You know, I know you know this. You can't even drink out of a non-sponsored cup at those events if you don't have your Diet Coke in a Powerade cup out by courtside. You're going to get escorted back to the back. So I think little things like that almost are more helpful when it comes to those type of events. But yeah, I mean, any type of experience you get in settings like that certainly helps the next time around, and I think that was felt in Dallas for sure.
Two more media questions, then we're going to get into the heart of the territory here. How have you seen sports media change from when you kind of started as to now, maybe even dating back to the college days? Because I can't imagine life before social media, but a lot of the quote-unquote legends have worked through it.
Yeah.
What do you see different?
So I guess in a sense I feel like I'm a little bit lucky in that I did grow up in a time where, you know, social media was my native language, so to speak. You know, that's the type of stuff that I grew up on. Even, you know, in middle school and high school is when Facebook and Twitter were really starting to get popular. So in many ways, it's like, you know, you feel kind of lucky that you know all that stuff before you even get to the point where you're using it for your job. But definitely the push towards digital in all aspects. You know, even at my station, you know, we put a very large emphasis on our digital platforms, and you know, the amount of exposure that we give to them, even versus TV sometimes. You know, I work for a television station, and a lot of times, you know, obviously your priority is turning content to go in our newscasts, but there's so many more avenues that we have now, and we have a great digital platform that, you know, is live streamed on. I couldn't even tell you all the places it's live streamed. You know, Facebook is probably the biggest one, but we're on like Roku, and I'm pretty sure we're on YouTube now, and all these different platforms, and so that's a part of our responsibilities now. You know, when we're in Dallas, you know, in addition to turning live shows and live content for all of our different, you know, television newscasts, you know, every single day, one of us out there was having to do a live segment on we call it OTT, over the top. It's basically everything but TV. We had to do, you know, we're required to do live segments for those platforms as well. So, definitely, I would say where the business is going and where it's been going for a while is that trend towards multiple platforms, being everywhere, being direct and immediate to whoever is consuming the content that you're putting out. And I think that's kind of always been the challenge is how can you reach the most amount of people and do it in a way where you know, the current generation of media consumers are accessing that content.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that I didn't hear you mention, but I know it's a fact by talking to local TV people and everything, time. You don't have it so much, so that's where that digital content, I think, comes into big play. The other thing I find funny that we wouldn't have, you know, thought of before the social media days is a lot of times I'll see on the Twitter or whatever where you and your, I guess I don't want to say rivals, but the people from the other stations are all taking pictures because y'all are covering it. And it used to be, oh man, we can't talk to those people. You know, like it's funny how the world has come full circle in that. Talk about the point of having good relationships with people in the industry in your city, but they may not work for DBJ.
Well, I think the perfect word to describe it is probably friendly competition. You know, I'm not going to lie. I definitely, you know, always keep in mind, you know, what other stations are doing, how they're covering things. You know, we obviously want our work to be the best, and you know, every time I cover something, I want to go out there and try to do it, you know, better than anybody else. But at the same time, you know, we're all kind of, you know, in the fire together, so to speak.
Right.
And, you know, you work here long enough and people stick around long enough, you forge those relationships. And, you know, I would like to think that I consider most of the other, you know, especially the TV people, you know, they're all friends of mine, and everybody kind of gets along. And that's the good thing about this market here in the Roanoke, Lynchburg area, is that, you know, nobody has a huge ego. Nobody really acts like that to where, you know, oh, you're my competitor, I can't speak to you. You know, if we're at a, you know, let's say we're down in Charlotte for the ACC tip-off event or something like that, we're all eating lunch together. You know, we're all there for the same reason. Even though, yeah, obviously, you know, we all want our work to stand out and represent our stations the best. It goes beyond that, you know, at different points. So I kind of separate, you know, the work aspect of it with the, you know, people relationship aspect of it. And everyone's great around here, so it's pretty easy to do.
And I think you do a really great job because you've been in it for a couple of years, but, you know, for lack of a better term, you're not from around here where some of the other people have that advantage on you to where they are. So I think kudos to you, and kudos for asking Ryan Ruocco at the Final Four a Yankees question. Let's talk about the Bronx Bombers. I was scared to watch them last night because I feel like every time I watch them, bad things happen. But I knew I was going to talk to you today, so I had to do that prep. Anthony Volpe, give me your thoughts on the youngster real quick.
Well, I was actually, so the day that he was announced as making the opening day roster, I was actually driving back from New York. So as I said earlier, I'm from there originally. Mm-hmm. I went back first week, or I guess it was the last week of March. I actually had a fantasy baseball draft up there with some of my buddies from back home from the high school years. But driving back, I get the notification that Volpe makes the roster, and immediately it was really cool for me because a few years ago, back when the Yankees had their Pulaski rookie ball team, the Pulaski Yankees, he actually started there right after he got drafted, and I got to go there and meet him and interview him. And, you know, at the time, I think this was probably the summer of 2019, you know, he's an 18, 19-year-old kid who just got drafted. You know, his path to the big leagues was obviously long and winding, and none of us could have guessed, you know, there would be a global pandemic mixed into the middle of it. And so at the time, you don't realize you're talking to the guy who in 4 years people are going to be, you know, labeling as the savior of the New York Yankees, so to speak. But it's cool to see him get this opportunity. I'm glad that they called him up to start the year. Obviously, there's going to be some growing pains. I mean, the kid's a rookie. He's played like 20 games in AAA or something like that. He basically skipped that level of his development and went right to the big league. So, you know, you're going to deal with some tough at-bats on occasion. You know, he's facing the best pitchers on planet Earth. But whenever he gets on base, you know, you saw him last night dancing around first base when Aaron Judge is at the plate. He's a threat to steal. I think the power's going to come. And I'm just excited for what he's going to bring. It feels like it could possibly be manning that shortstop position for the better part of 10-plus years if you know, the cards are played right over there in the Bronx. So I'm excited about him.
Is he, I don't want to say set up to fail, and I don't want to say you guys are best buddies, but can he take the expectations? Because there was another pretty good guy that played short for the Yankees, and anytime you succeed Jeter, I think comparisons are going to come just as they would if you were playing the center field position, because, you know, Mantle played there, DiMaggio played there, and so forth. So can he succeed?
And that's, I feel like that's the blessing and the curse of being a Yankee, right? I mean, you're never going to come up, and it's going to be tough to be the best player at your position no matter where you are at the field. But I think he absolutely can. From everything I see, it seems like he's got a great head on his shoulders. Of course you're seeing the Jeter comparisons. I saw some, in my opinion, pretty silly tweets on Twitter the other night where he hit his first career home run and they ended up losing the game, but someone took a screen grab of his post-game press conference and he was, smiling ear to ear afterwards, which, rightfully so. He just hit his first big league home run.
Right.
And people saying, "Oh, I don't like that he's smiling after a loss." Well, yeah, maybe Jeter wouldn't have done that, but Jeter's also 1 in a million, and Derek Jeters don't exactly grow on trees. So
yep.
let the kid be Anthony Volpe. He doesn't have to be Derek Jeter. And you know what? He's got a pretty good captain standing out there in right field or center field every night to kind of point him in the right direction. So follow Judge's lead, and I think he'll be A-okay.
Did you want the Yankees to re-sign Judge? I know that might be a stupid question, but they were going to have to pay out the yin-yang for him after last year.
I did. I mean, to be quite honest with you, Bob, after they got swept by the Houston Astros in the ALCS, I thought for sure that was probably the last we were going to see of Aaron Judge. I'm glad it's not, obviously. To be honest, I thought Judge might decide, his time in pinstripes was up. And he was going to go, maybe go back home and be a Giant. Obviously, we got the scare from Paul Heyman, arson Judge. We all remember that day on Twitter. I was actually on set when that tweet was sent by John Heyman, and I kind of had a panic attack before I was about to read the 5 o'clock sports. But all's well that ends well, and yeah, I'm super glad he's back with the Yankees. They got to put a better team around him, and I don't think they've done that yet, but. Some of my other Yankee fan friends are already starting to panic, but the season's still so young. It's April, for goodness sake. I mean, can we get to the trade deadline? I'll tell you this.
Well,
I'll throw one back at
please.
you. I got this from one of my buddies yesterday. He's already looking at the trades and what moves they can make, before the trade deadline, all that. He mentioned Jock Peterson. I think that would be awesome. To get Jock in a Yankees uniform, batting from that left side, short porch, power bat. What do you think?
I always look at it as the what are you going to have to give up type of thing. Yeah. That's kind of my, the thing that worries me is I'm not a great big Josh Donaldson fan anyway. Because every instance you've ever seen, the common denominator in these instances is Josh Donaldson. Yeah. He's got a hamstring issue, which I think can linger more than a broken bone, if that makes sense. Yeah. That concerns me. So I think somebody like Peterson, you mentioned the left-hand short porch, it might be imperative to go get them at the trading deadline because, I love DJ LeMahieu too, but he's not exactly been the beacon of health. No. Either. So how are you protecting Judge?
And then you throw in Giancarlo Stanton, who when he's on the field is a monster, but he's another guy who now he's got a hamstring issue, and he's probably out for another 6 weeks.
But I'm kind of with you. I don't think you can stack the lineup right-handed either. You got to, and I know you got Rizzo, and that's great. But 1 out of 9 left-handed hitters that can actually thread in the order, I don't think is that great. Now, what I was going to say is, if I gave you $100 of Monopoly money, how much of that do you put on Ohtani wearing pinstripes next year?
I would probably put $5 on that.
Me too.
I don't think that's happening. I think it's probably going to be the Dodgers or the Mets.
Yep.
The way that the Yankees have operated, and it's crazy to say, weird to say, maybe people will hate me for this, but they've been frugal, I think, is probably the word you would use. And obviously, they gave Judge the bag. They paid for Carlos Rodon, who we didn't even mention also had to make in the field. And Spoon just said a few minutes ago that he's going for another scan, so that's always going to make you feel great. But they haven't seemed like they're willing to go out and spend a ton on free agents over the last couple of years, and this is probably going to be the richest free agent contract in Major League history. So do I see Hal Steinbrenner giving Ohtani $500 million to be in pinstripes? Probably not, but I don't know. There's also never been a Shohei Ohtani available, so I guess we'll have to wait and see.
True. We'll get you back on to discuss that. I know you got to run, but I want to keep you for just a minute to talk about the NBA playoffs, who do you like to be on the stage at the end?
Well, it's crazy, right? Because we're already seeing like the Golden State Warriors go down 2-0 in their series. And I saw like, I don't know if this stat was just them as defending champs, but they've never been down 2-0 after winning a championship, the year after winning a championship. I don't know if that's ever like any season or just after the year they win a championship. But,
right.
You know, we got teams like the Sacramento Kings up 2-0 in a series. That's not something we're used to. So it feels like it's kind of a crazy year in the NBA. In the East, I would have to go with the Bucks, but that's going to depend on the health of Giannis. I know he didn't play in Game 2, but they still kind of rolled over the Heat. Tough to lose a game when you're putting up 130 something points.
Right.
Pretty bad job by the Heat there, but I probably will stick with the Bucks. I think they can probably get past the Heat, whether Giannis plays or not. And if he comes back, I think they're obviously the team to beat. In the West, it feels like it's so much more wide open. I don't know who the heck to pick out there. I mean, your gut kind of tells you, like, you know, Phoenix probably has the greatest collection of talent now that they got KD out there. But, you know, they're in for a battle in their series with the Clippers. I don't know. I really don't know who to pick out of the West. I guess I was telling my friends a couple of months ago, I feel like the Nuggets are due. I guess I'll go with the Nuggets, but I don't feel great about that pick. I don't know. Who do you like?
Yeah, you know, and the thing is, I'm not a big LeBron fan, and I know the Lakers have had their woes, and I know LeBron's older, but it's hard to, when they're in, it's hard to just dismiss them. Now, again, got to stay healthy. You got a very solid big two in LeBron and Anthony Davis. Don't forget about them. With Morant being hurt, boy, that makes Memphis's tough. That makes their job a lot more tougher.
Right.
To get in. So, I mean, you know, gosh, I would give the monopoly money to somebody else and say, here, you take it, because I don't even want to touch it. But, you know, playoffs are fun to watch. And one thing in closing, the NHL playoffs, to me, those are good times where the remote control can die in the batteries. Because when you get to playoff hockey, and it's especially like if it's an overtime situation or whatnot, I don't want to turn the channel. I can't turn it.
I was watching, I guess it was the Minnesota Wild Dallas Stars game a couple of nights ago, and it ended after 2 a.m. And I was up watching it because it was so compelling. It was, I think it was double over. I don't think it got to triple overtime, but it was double. It was late in double overtime. Minnesota killed off a penalty, and then they go down and win it after getting dominated in the 2 overtime periods. But hey, it doesn't matter how many shots the other team gets. They just got to put one in the back of the net. And there's so many different. I mean, in a way, that's what makes playoff hockey so good. Sometimes it isn't the best team who comes away with a win. There's a lot of luck involved. There's a lot of, you know, intangibles involved in playoff hockey. I mean, you got to grind it out. We saw it last night at the Berglund Center here in Roanoke. I mean, the Rail Yard Dogs are playing in the semifinals, and the first thing out of Coach Dan Bremner's mouth after the game was they won the game 3-2. And he said, yeah, that was ugly. That was really, really ugly, and we can't play like that if we want to win this series. But guess what? They won the game. So sometimes you got to do it ugly. That's kind of what playoff hockey is all about. And me being a New York Rangers fan, we typically do it pretty ugly because I barely remember a series they've had in the last 10 years that didn't go 7 games. So they're up 1-0 on the Devils right now. I'd be shocked if this series ended before Game 6.
What sport needs a bigger uptick, or I don't know, I don't want to use the term makeover, but hockey or baseball? Hockey or baseball? What needs more of this? You know, I think baseball's problem is maybe similar to hockey. Baseball is a Dominican sport in terms of people coming into play. Hockey has people from the north or Europe coming into play. So what needs a bigger boost?
Well, I guess I'll say hockey because I feel like at the very least, baseball is trying. And, you know, the early returns so far, I think, are positive on the pitch clock and, you know, the shift and things of that nature. You know, I think the World Baseball Classic was huge in this spring just to kind of drum up excitement for the sport. You know, you saw those crowds, and obviously it's a different setting when you're talking about, you know, national teams and that aspect to it. But, you know, those games in Japan and in Miami were insane. And obviously, you know, we get the Ohtani versus Trout moment in the finals to kind of put a bow on it. But, I think baseball is at least trying to do some things to sort of bring their game to a national stage. But you know what? I got to give the NHL credit too, because, and partially to the networks as well.
Yep.
Since they went to ESPN and Turner last year and away from NBC, it's felt like there's been a little bit more of a spotlight shined on the NHL as well. And maybe that's just because they have the ESPN effect now, to where you're watching ESPN, you're going to see commercials. They're going to talk about you on SportsCenter a little bit more than the past. Maybe not. You're not going to be the lead story on First Take, but you get your mentions, you get your Barry Melrose segments, and just being on those two major networks that also broadcast the NBA and talk a lot about football. Maybe you get more people to tune in when you got a hockey game playing on ESPN or ESPN2 in a primetime slot every night. So I don't know. It's tough to say. I guess I'd probably still stick with NHL, because I feel like they're always going to be sort of the little brother when it comes to the big four major sports here in the U.S. But, the thing about hockey is you got to go see a game in person. If you've never been to a game, you're not going to appreciate what all is going on and how intense and how exciting it is. There's no better time to get into it than this time of the year.
We'll get you on again soon. I know you're getting ready to run over to Northside to get some highlights of some people signing. How important is it that the local high school sports get covered for even athletes that are not going D1?
Well, we try our best, and those are always cool, because you get to see all the people involved, and we don't know a lot of these kids personally, but you get to see on those days sort of the glimpses of what all went into their journeys to this point, and all the people who kind of helped them on this way. So that's always the cool part for me. And the unfortunate part is we cover such a huge area that we can't possibly get to every single one of these signings. But the ones that we do get to, we try to go and give these kids, some love, because like you said, you don't have to be committing to, go play football at Alabama or basketball at Duke to make it onto the local news. We got plenty of really solid D3 athletes in this area, and a lot of them are sticking around and playing in the ODAC, and we're going to end up seeing them, playing college too. So it's cool to see, and it's definitely something that we value for sure.
Anthony, always appreciate the time. We'll do this again really soon.
Bob, appreciate you, and I'd love to be back on. Thank you so much, man.